It's that time. Your fix is here. College football is a year-round discussion with these two. Here's JC and Morgan. Mike Morgan of ESPN and JC Shurburtt of 24/7 Sports have you covered. Beginning right now.
And with that, we say good morning and welcome the first March installment of JC and Morgan. He is JC Shurburtt of 24/7 Sports, coming to you from the Windy City. Mike Morgan here of ESPN, SEC Network, here in the mecca of college football, Atlanta, GA. It's a busy show for you today. Ross Dellenger of Yahoo Sports will join us for the first time. He's one of the few kind of pundits of the sport, if you will, that we haven't had on yet. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know Russ that well. I just know that every time I see a breaking story, it's got Ross Dellenger. It's either two people. It's Ross or it's Pete Thamel, who we'll have on later on this month. Those two guys have just been crushing it. But Ross is a unique story that we'll get into later with him. I think he went to Mississippi State. I know he spent most of his youth in the Louisiana, Mississippi area. So a true Southerner, actually covering the sport that we love, which is refreshing, and was at SI and now is at Yahoo. Yahoo's actually got some good people, and I'll be honest with you, like I don't go to Yahoo for much of anything else, but they do a good job on college football. I don't have any value in Sports Illustrated anymore. Seems like all their good people are gone. You can get social commentary from Pat Forty if you want it. But anyway, we look forward to having Ross on. Like the last few days alone, you just follow him on Twitter, and it's just one bombshell after another. JC, you and I were on another show on Friday, and like the last thing I said when we came off is, oh, by the way, Ross Dellenger is reporting the following. College leaders expected to finalize recommendations to adopt the long-expected player-to-coach helmet communication system, use of tablets on the sideline and during halftime, and a 2-minute warning in case you didn't feel like college football was the NFL enough. All of those things are coming down the pipe. That in addition to NIL and the expanded playoff and everything. We'll get into all of that, and, of course, the JC5. But with all that being said, good morning, sir.
Good morning. Yeah, one of the pundits, I think, out there tweeted, college football, we need to shorten the games next year, college football. Just think about how many ad spots we could sell with a 2-minute warning.
Oh, yeah. A lot of money. And you know what? And you can justify it easier now because with the rule changes, now you do stop the clock on a first down in the final 2 minutes. That I don't think that's going away. But you don't do it every down. Right? Yeah. So that was the big – so we lost 5 plays a game in college football. That was the net loss. So
probably
now you can
2 or 3 back on average is what they said. You get 2 or 3 back with this 2-minute warning thing.
With the 2-minute warning. So it just all kind of works out in their own way. But you hit the nail on the head. It's absolutely about ad revenue in that 2-minute warning.
Yeah, I guess it's going to happen. I mean, you got a set time out there everybody will take. I mean, it's going to be weird when you hear 2-minute warning and you don't hear da-da-dun, 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 or whatever the CBS
whatever
one
the
is,
CBS
which is
one
also
is.
Equally dramatic, by the way. Those NFL,
CBS one's very dramatic. It's like an orchestra.
I
don't know, Jim. I think it's 2-minute warning, Jim.
And we've been robbed in the SEC now of
yeah, I don't think that's coming.
No,
I don't know what's going to. Are they going to use?
I would have bought that along. Yeah, it's now going to be Big Ten, and
wow.
Notre Dame. I think no, it's not. I don't. No, Notre Dame's playing a Big Ten. No, it's all Big Ten for the
wow
for CBS Sports, and then CBS Sports Network. Of course, will still have the Mountain West and those types of things that they have. But yeah, it's that's going to stink a little bit. But I just like that. I think that's one of the best college football opening those theme songs.
Everybody loves it.
I mean, everybody. I mean that's been for 30 years SEC. So
yeah.
Anyway, yeah, it's gonna be weird the 2-minute warning, a little bit, but I'm pro more plays. We wait all year to watch these teams play, and we talk about it incessantly. and you only have 12 guaranteed. To me, the more football that we love, the better. But I get it. You're and look, when I'm sitting there wanting to watch a game and another game is on, and the outcome is not in doubt, and there's timeout after timeout after timeout, and sandbagging, commercial after commercial. Yeah, I get a little frustrated, but I will take that frustration over like cutting the game down that we all love to watch. And I think the 2-minute warning is going to lead to like more comebacks, more exciting finishes, because it's going to be more difficult if a team is if a team's sitting there with one timeout, or you're usually, if you're on offense with less than 4 minutes left, one first down away from salting it away. I haven't done the math on that, but I'm pretty sure percentage wise, you get that first down with under 4 to go, and you have the lead, and they have one timeout or less, you're doing good. Well, now they got 2. So that could change things, and so I think we'll have more exciting finishes, which is something none of us should be opposed to. I don't think, I think that's probably going to serve coaches pretty well, and serve the game pretty well when all is said and done. I hate it that it's a pro thing, and it's been a pro thing since I was alive. But as far as how does it impact a football game or broadcast entertainment wise and otherwise, strategically, I sort of like it. So there you go.
There's only 2 things left. There's only 2 things. If you just want to go, okay, let's not even camouflage this. All right, let's just come right out and tell you that we want to be the NFL. Number 1, you have to have 2 feet in bounds for a legal reception. That's the major. There's 2 major rules differences. That one, and number 2, and this one I would like to see changed. Like if you intercept a pass and then you slip and fall, but nobody is within 10 yards of you, you're down right there. In the NFL, of course, you can get up and still run. In college, when you're down, you're down. I wouldn't mind seeing that one change. But that's about it. Everything else, we're pretty much mirroring the NFL in almost every way possible.
Well, there's one big thing, like strategically, that we don't always talk about, but coaches do, is the hash marks.
That's true. Wider in college, yeah.
The spread, NFL, with the way they play it with the hash marks, they negate your advantage to spread the field in a lot of ways. That's why in the NFL you see so many more like bunch formations and tight formations and things like that, because they're trying to get an edge that way down and create space. Whereas in college, if you do that, it kind of works against you, because you're actually crowding the line of scrimmage, which nobody wants to do. You want to spread them out and create space for your playmakers. So, and I wouldn't want that to go away, because I think that's one of the big reasons why in college, Mike, you can see offenses like, futuristic style offenses succeed. Whereas in the NFL, it's no matter how much it evolves in terms of being a little more wide open in the pass game, or borrowing concepts from the air raid like the Chiefs do, it's still the same game, And I always say pro ball is the same sport, but a different game. And I think those hashes really impact schematically what they do on both sides of the ball, just because of the spread element. So that would be one thing I would like shake my head in disappointment. And I, look, the 2 feet down thing, I would probably not like that either, because there's been plenty of great plays in college where you get that one toe in and it's exciting, and it's still a hell of a play,
Absolutely.
So we'll
I wish the NFL would adopt the college rule on that one. I would flip too. I would have the NFL adopt the 1 foot in is good enough, but then I would have college adopt the if you slip and fall and nobody touches you, you can still get up and run. That's a couple things I'd like to see. By the way, the NFL used to stick its nose up at college ball and college coaches. I remember an old NFL Films video, and had Jerry Glanville riding these officials. He goes, "Is that a Bula Bula official? Is that one of those college guys? Is that yeah? This ain't college ball." But if you watch NFL offenses, and if you watch the most brilliant of the brilliant, like an Andy Reid, they're stealing a lot of stuff from college. They're stealing a lot of plays, designs, and overall philosophies from college. It's really more so that than the other way around. So I think now that the line between the two levels has been blurred more than ever. So
Absolutely, yeah. It's just a matter of spacing. It's kind of funny. Most sports do come down to elite spacing. If you think about all sports, it's a spacing game. That's why I could never coach. I could never coach, Mike, because I can't like see in 3D. Like my wife can sit there and look at a package from what's the first IKEA, which is the death of all male humans. And she in her mind, she knows how to put it together, right? And because her dad was that way, I can't do that. So I don't understand spacing. That's what therefore I could never coach, because you got to kind of see in 3D to have that gift. So yeah. And so obviously when your space is condensed, that changes this or spread out, changes the spacing and all that. But it's a good sport either way. 2-minute warning. Hey, bring it on. That's more football. So let's roll.
All right, speaking of let's roll, let's go tempo. Let's go ahead, no huddle, tempo. Let's go Buffalo Bills 1990s K-Gun and rifle through the award-winning, the highly anticipated, the morale of a great nation relies heavily upon the JC5.
It's time for the top topics in the sport. We bring the JC5. Number 1.
All right, Mike. I've probably been to a lot of stadiums around the country, and you have too, probably more so than most human beings. I've been more for non-games than games, just to be honest with you. But I have bucket list stadiums, and I'll just throw my 2 out. And then what are your 2 that you have not seen a game at that you want to? You're limited to 2. I have Rose Bowl and Notre Dame Stadium. I was jealous of Georgia fans in 2017, not necessarily because of the success they had, but because they got to go see a game in South Bend and a game in Pasadena in the same season. How about that? And then come home to Atlanta to play for all the marbles. What are your 2 what are the 2 bucket list stadiums on Mike Morgan's very exclusive and selective list?
Yeah, I've knocked off most of them, but Camp Randall, Wisconsin, and now especially, I doubt I'll ever be there to call a game. That would be high upon the list, and I'll also add Notre Dame. And I've had opportunities, like literally sideline passes, to go to South Bend. It just hasn't worked out on the schedule. But those are 2 that need to happen and will happen, but in my lifetime. Those are bucket listers.
I live within 2 hours drive of both of those places. You'd be surprised how close Madison actually is to.
Yeah, no, you're in the spot. If I lived where you live now, then I would have already knocked these 2 out. But been to every SEC stadium. I can't tell you how many times. Been to every Big 12 stadium. Been to just about every ACC stadium, with the exception of Boston College. And of course, now I can add a couple more to the list. Although I've been to Stanford, I've been to SMU. But yeah, I'm running out of bucket list places, but those would definitely be the 2.
Number two.
Okay, the new Big 12. And we had this discussion last year about new teams of the Big 12. Who carries the torch? Give me 3 off the top of your head. I'm going to go with Kansas State, Oklahoma State, both of which have knocked at the door for playoffs, national championships, whatever, in the last 20 years. And Utah, which also has knocked at the door of a playoff. No offense to TCU, but I'm going to go with those 3. Give me your 3.
Well, I'm a lifelong. I've been saying this for 10 years, not necessarily when I was in the womb, because he wasn't at Utah then. But Kyle Whittingham, to me, is I say it every year, is one of the most underrated coaches in college football. And I think Utah will definitely do good things in time. I think now Mike Gundy, the mullet, who's still a man, no longer 40, he's actually early 50s. It's set up for Oklahoma State. You no longer have that option. And I realize they won Bedlam last year, but for the most part, they were dominated in Bedlam. They'd have a really good year, and then Oklahoma would take them to the woodshed. Or they'd have a really good year, and then they had that inexcusable, unexplainable loss. It's set up to me. I don't think anybody is going to do what Alabama did in the SEC for all those years, or what Clemson most recently did in the ACC, or what Michigan and Ohio State do in the Big Ten. I think this will be the most diversified in terms of Champions League. But I think Oklahoma State has the best chance to be the preeminent one. And yes, I will add UCF in time. The Gus Bus. They didn't have the personnel this year to be very good, but there's so many things in their favor that they can now bring. They can sell recruits on Power 5. They've got good enough facilities. I think UCF could certainly be good. So those are two. Obviously, Utah's up there as well. But if you ask me to name two in the immediate future, yeah, I'll go Okie State and the Knights. Don't call them the Golden Knights.
Number 3.
All right, Mike. March Madness is right around the corner. So we're going to have a lot of football schools playing in the big dance and a lot of basketball schools. Football school means to me a place where football is more important than basketball, or that's the sport on campus, right? Not necessarily a powerhouse football program, but it's just those fans gravitate more to football than basketball. Give me a football school that should be great at hoops but isn't, and I'll give you mine. Arizona State. The alma mater of one Byron Scott of Lakers Showtime, Eddie House, James Harden, right there in Phoenix, close to California. Not hard to get into.
Mario Bennett years ago.
In a state where their brothers are really one of the best programs in the country. But that's my take, so give me one of yours.
Well, look, Michigan comes to mind, and I realize they've had some spurts here and there. It doesn't look like it's going very well right now. Again, you hire a former pro, and it sounds real good, but look at the track record of former NBA guys, like not just like scrubs. I'm talking like big-time NBA guys like a Juwan Howard, and they don't typically work. They just don't. You're going to win the press conference every time, right? You're going to win that press conference, but they don't typically work. But Michigan should be good in basketball, and they should be playing for championships, I believe. You've got Detroit, puts out a lot of talent. You've got tradition. You've got facility. You got a lot of things going for you. But Michigan is one. I mean, Texas, again, one Final Four under Rick Barnes. And other than that, they were a consistent tournament, but since Rick left, or actually, so let me rephrase that, since they pushed Rick out the door and into the waiting arms of Tennessee and Vol Nation, it hadn't been a lot to celebrate there. They should be better in college basketball on a consistent bit. For whatever reason, it did not work under Shaka Smart either. They thought they had some gold. And I would say anybody in California, Southern Cal, UCLA, somebody out there has to be good in basketball. Like, there's a ton of talent. And the Pac, overshadowed by its demise and complete downward spiral on the gridiron, the Pac got progressively worse and worse in basketball. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that California teams just never lived up to it. Stanford was bad. Southern Cal was bad. UCLA was bad. It's bad. I don't understand it. So I would throw all those out there in your category.
UCLA is not consistent. Like, the California schools have conceded ground in that league. That league no more. The league is no more. Like
the defunct.
Like Washington State is up there, right now. Oregon is really good in basketball. Like, places like Cal and SC especially, because Stanford kind of goes up, and UCLA did play for a national title the pandemic year against I'm sorry, they were in the Final Four against Gonzaga and lost one of the best games I've ever seen. But right now, they're not even – I don't even think they're going to be in the tournament this year under Mick Cronin. So that's another one. There's no excuse for UCLA. And really, Southern Cal, with how they recruit, should be great, a lot better than they have been. So you're right about that.
Number 3.
All right, taking us back closer.
4.
Well, number 4, yeah, taking us back closer to the ATL. What do you think about Auburn in year 2 under Hugh Freeze? They had some drama that took place, but it was overshadowed because in their state, Nick Saban retired.
Right.
And nobody talked about it, but at the same time, Cadillac Williams is leaving. Zach Etheridge is getting the boot. They're changing coaches. Players are transferred. One of their coaches went to Florida and put something on Twitter negatively about Hugh Freeze and then took it back. I mean, what are your thoughts here? Peyton Thorne's coming back at quarterback, but your thoughts about the Tigers year 2?
I don't think they were equipped last year to be competitive. And, this is the downside of firing coaches after 2 years Harsin was there. The good news is you feel like you've solved all the problems, right? You just pin it all on the guy who's on the way out. The bad news is very often there's collateral damage with every coaching change, and I think there was some of that there. I still think Hugh Freeze was the right hire. I still think Hugh Freeze will do good things at Auburn. I don't know, again, if this is the year. I think they'll be better, but when you stack up their roster, again, that's the first thing I look at. I don't look at the coaches right off the bat. I look at the personnel, and the personnel tells me, they're not going to be one of the top 3 or 4 teams in the SEC this year, and that's the expectation level. Remember, they fired Gus Malzahn for winning 2/3 of his conference games and beating Nick Saban multiple times, and that wasn't good enough. So we know what the expectation level is at Auburn. And so maybe it won't be good enough again this year either, but you better sink or swim with this guy. You can't just recycle and fire this guy, fire that guy every time Auburn doesn't have a great year. But I still think it's going to take year 3 before you're really going to see an Auburn team compete for big prizes.
Number 5.
This is quick. All right, so we all love Big East basketball here in its current form. I love it. That's why I hope Connecticut doesn't join some other league because I think they belong there. But let's take you back to Big East football, Mike, the glory days. They had a CBS television contract. The Big East rivalry you miss the most. And I have 2, and I can't decide. Maybe you can break the tie. Virginia Tech, West Virginia. People don't understand how much they hate each other. And then the backyard brawl with the Mountaineers and Pitt, which they rekindled the last 2 years, and you saw the emotion from that game. Really, Miami Boston College could be, Miami Virginia Tech could be in the mix. There was a lot of pretty good series in the old Big East, but what say you? Temple, maybe? I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
I mean, for me, it's the backyard brawl, and honestly, I think it's a distant second for me. I can't think of much that really comes close to that. First off, that's one of the best nicknames in a college football rivalry ever. Backyard brawl. I don't know who came up with it or when they came up with it, but damn, does that stick. That's really good stuff. But yeah, I mean, if you haven't seen the 30 for 30 Requiem for the Big East, which is it's a 2-hour watch, but it's so good. And it shows these frustrated Hall of Fame basketball coaches upset with the fact that they basically sold that sport out in the quest to get the money from football. And then the money from football wasn't enough, and before you knew it, football completely got disintegrated. Everybody was poaching teams from the Big East, and it's never been the same since, and the rest is history. We don't have Big East football, and Big East basketball has a new look. It's basically an all basketball league, but not the same prowess that it used to have. But that would be my answer to that particular question. And there we have it. That concludes the JC5.
It's a heck of a JC5.
I mean, it was efficient. We marched right down the field. No penalties, no turnovers. We set up our team for success. We hope to have success reaching Ross Dellenger when we take a quick timeout and come back. More JC and Morgan on the other side.
Chicken cock originated in Kentucky, like so many other bourbons. And so the resurrection of it, Paris, Kentucky, that's the county seat of Bourbon County. So much of this whiskey was being made in that Bourbon County, put on ships and barges and shipped down Ohio, down the Mississippi, and got to New Orleans where it got distributed all over the world. And people kept saying, well, hey, I want some more of that whiskey from Bourbon County. And so that's how bourbon whiskey got its name. And chicken cock originated actually in Paris, Kentucky, which is today Bourbon County.
Listen up. This is for construction professionals, contractors, facility managers, or do-it-yourself homeowners. SitePro Rentals is ready to equip your upcoming project. We rent construction equipment for any size job. Boom and scissor lifts, telehandlers, skid steers, excavators, air compressors, generators, even small tools and equipment. SitePro has you covered. If you are ready for better equipment rental, call SitePro and rent from the local, friendly, easy to do business with equipment professionals. Call 972-RENT-NOW. That's 972-736-8669 to rent the newest equipment in the Atlanta market. Call 972-RENT-NOW or visit siteprorentals.com. South Carolinians, this message is for you, as well as for people in Georgia, Florida, and Tennessee. If you think you may need work done to your roof or a new roof altogether, there's one simple name to remember: Elite Roofing and Restoration. South Carolina native Jeremy Johnson has been helping people in the South make sure they have the very best people checking on and building new roofs for over 25 years. Fully licensed, bonded, and insured, they provide the best service possible. Call or email today, 678-781-1998. That's 678-781-1998, or you can go to eliteroofingga.com. Schedule a no-hassle, free inspection today. Wind damage, hail damage, or just wear and tear. Don't settle for second best. Let Jeremy Johnson and Elite Roofing and Restoration take care of it all for you today.
All right, welcome back. It is JC and Morgan here on a Monday, our first installment of the month of March, and happy to be joined. As I mentioned at the top of the show, we've had just about everybody I can think of on a national basis that covers the sport well, except for this gentleman. And Ross, you and I don't know each other. We haven't crossed paths. I know we know all the same people. But I was saying at the top, I've really been a fan of your work here because every time I look at a big story, it's either you or Thamel, right? You guys are like breaking everything. So let me start with what I started with at the top. On Friday, like we're wrapping up another show, and it's like, okay, everything's done. And then I take a look at your timeline at the last second on Twitter, and you say, oh, by the way, after meetings this week, college leaders are expected to finalize recommendations to adopt the long-expected player-to-coach helmet comm system, use of tablets on the sideline, and yes, a 2-minute warning. That combined with all of your work covering on the expanded playoff from 12 to 14, which seems like an inevitability. So obviously the lead question for you would be on all the stories you broke. UMass going to the MAC. That's what we want to talk about. What was that like covering that story?
I didn't cover it at all.
Well, shame on you then. All right, that's it. This interview's over.
Come on, man.
I pick and choose these days, and that was one I did not choose.
No, but in all seriousness, can you think, like, we get it. Like, this is what the NFL does. The NFL has made it a 12-month out of the year sport where you just can't ignore it. I mean, the draft coverage alone, that gives you 2 months of stuff, if not more. College football is now in that space. So for you as a guy who covers it, and you're always looking for stuff to write about, this has got to be like the gift that keeps on giving. It's like the Jello of the Month Club from Cousin Eddie.
Well, it certainly produces a lot of content for us, right? The dysfunction within college athletics these days does have a benefit in a way for us. At the same time, it would be nice. Well, two things. It would be nice to sometimes have a longer stretch of an off season that doesn't really exist anymore. And the second thing is, we as in college specific football media used to spend a lot of us writers used to spend the off season traveling campuses and writing features and writing about players and writing about coaches and getting to know them. It's harder to do that with the news cycle. And it's kind of unfortunate.
Of the stories surrounding the 14-team playoff possibility, first off, when did you first hear that was a possibility, and what facet of it, whether it's the automatic bid part of it, whether it's the Big Ten and the SEC kind of running roughshod over everybody else, that facet of it. What chapter of that book has kind of thrown the biggest curveball for you covering the sport?
Well, I think we first mentioned the 14 or 16 team possibility probably over a month ago in a story. The Big Ten commissioner had held private conversations with other commissioners about the 14 team format. And so that was something that seemed to be a thing heading into that initial meeting really a month ago. And then heading in a couple weeks ago, and they met again and kind of narrowed it down into this model. So it was kind of expected. And then, leading into that meeting, we had reported that SEC Big Ten wanted multiple, automatic qualifiers. So this was kind of been a long time coming, probably many months of private conversations, especially with those SEC Big Ten leaders. So it was kind of always drifting into this direction. I think that the big surprising change for many people, including to a degree me, was the concept of the bye. The two byes would be solely, exclusively held by the Big Ten and the SEC champion. That was something that I think kind of surprised some people, and certainly has gotten some pushback more than just the model in general.
So I'm Florida State. Let me just follow up on that.
Go ahead.
I'm Florida State. I go 12-0 in the ACC. Then I win the conference championship game. I have a win over Florida. That used to be a big time thing. We'll see if it is under year 3 of Billy Napier. And I've got all the metrics on my side, and I'm told by the committee, that's great, but you don't play in the SEC or the Big Ten, so therefore you have no chance of getting a bye. Is that not going to cause a little more pushback? And if so, is the feeling among the two pillars of the sport now, Petiti and Sankey, yeah, that's great, but that's the bylaws, my friend. It is what it is.
Well, yeah, I mean, in this scenario, that would happen, and obviously it would that would cause a lot of issues, and it's why I think the ACC specifically, among all the leagues, all the FBS leagues, I think the ACC specifically has raised real concerns about the bye concept. Because if you do the math from the last 10 years or so, and I've seen some of the numbers, I can't name them off exactly right now, but I recall the Big Ten and the ACC would have almost split the getting a bye, over the last 10 years. Big 12, I don't think would have gotten any, but the ACC and the Big Ten would have split them. The SEC would have got one, I think, virtually every year. So if I'm the ACC, I'm thinking that, my team has been number 1 or number 2 seed going into a playoff for half the time in the last decade or so. And so that's tough to swallow. And that's why I think you are seeing some pushback on that.
Yeah, and I'm not so sure that even if you look beyond the champions, Ross, that there aren't some years. 2016 comes to mind. The ACC was really quarterback heavy that year. I think they had the Heisman winner, they had the number 1 draft pick, and then they had Deshaun Watson and a bunch of other guys. That year, there were probably 3 good teams in the SEC, and one of them was Auburn that went to the Sugar Bowl at 8-4. So I don't think it's one thing to say, on average that those two are the best conferences, but it's not every single year. We already have a net ranking in basketball that, in my opinion, is based much more on style of play than wins and losses or perception. Are we getting away from where winning trumps all in sports, where we're adding these ancillary things on to what makes a good team and what doesn't?
Well, we certainly seem to be confused on how to select teams. It does seem to be that we're kind of college sports is kind of caught football in general in this in an issue over how to select the teams. And I think it's funny because it started with the bowls, and that's how when you look at the evolution of picking a champion, right? You started with matching up teams 1 and 2 into a bowl game, and the bowl games were selected by through the polls, and so people, and then you went to the BCS, right? You went to the opposite. You went to computers, and that caused a lot of issues, and so you went back to people and basically polls, with a specific committee, not necessarily a group of writers, but a specific committee with, I think, just one media member on, or former media member on the committee. And so you pick those stakeholders like within the industry to pick. And now we seem to be going toward a more professional model where you pick it based on like conference standings, which I don't have a problem with because, it does take out a lot of subjectivity. However, there are years where the third best Big Ten SEC team, and certainly the second best Big 12 and ACC team doesn't necessarily deserve a spot. I think through the years you could see that. We've had trouble. This is a long-standing issue for college football in how to pick a champion, and we seem to still having a lot of trouble.
Well, let me ask you this, and I'll kick it back to Mike. I think that these home playoff games are being kind of undervalued in this whole thing because, like, for example, if you're Georgia and you go and you lose to Bama, their fans are walking out of the stadium in Atlanta, putting calling their buddies from Moultrie, putting their home game tailgate together for another weekend in Athens. I mean, that's special, right? And they just lost the championship, whereas Alabama fans are trying to book a flight to Phoenix. Why not just go to 16 and have 8 campus games in the first round? What I think these buys into the bowls are being a little bit overvalued because you're really just talking about one more game, 2 more teams if you go to 14. What in your opinion is the thought process there?
Yeah, it does seem like when we went from 2 to 4, and then we went from 4 to 12 over the last couple of years, it seemed to be that next evolution was 16, not necessarily 14. I think, for the Big Ten SEC, I think getting, having reserving 2 buys for itself was part of the strategy, and having 14 and being able to just have buys. I think there probably is some issues with TV and TV windows. You start getting into broadcasting window issues because that's 2 more. I think that's 2 more first round games, right? Right now you had 6 and you'd have 4 because you'd have no buys and you have 2 more teams. So you'd have 2 more games. So that gives you 8. I mean, playing 8 games on a weekend with TV windows and stuff certainly could pose a problem. You only have certainly so many windows, but it's certainly a good point, and it would seem that was the next evolution. That's why I know a lot of people were a little surprised or miffed about the 14 team. But maybe it is the SEC and Big Ten giving themselves an opportunity to sit out the first round.
Well, and this is not inside knowledge based. I haven't talked to Greg Sankey or Tony Petitti about it, but I do think there is a genuine concern that if and when we go to 16, what is the motivation of, for example, the SEC championship game? Are you just playing for seeding at that point as opposed to a bye? And the SEC championship game has been one of the most special events on the college football calendar. Like, it's one of the few conference championship games that means something. It's sold out every year. There's high stakes involved. If you go to 16, I don't think a team would ever, with self-respect, would ever do this. But you even have people saying, well, why don't you just rest some players? Why don't you just, what is going to be your ultimate motivation if it's 100% for seeding and that is all?
Well, I think you bring up a good point about the championship games, and even at 14, let alone 16. I think even at 14, under the current model that's being bantered about, there are questions about the future of championship games. Even at 12, I think there were questions about the future of championship games for a variety of reasons. One, certainly this 14-team model disincentivizes championship games in most leagues if your top two are going to make it automatically. There's that. Number two, it's timing. If you do get rid of championship games, the whole schedule can move up. You can move the playoffs up so they don't infringe too much on the NFL and get too much into January. That's something that administrators have wanted to do for a while, and they've been talking about doing it. They really want the semis to be on New Year's Day, and that is kind of an essential piece. In order to do that, you have to move up everything. So, for a lot of reasons, the future of championship games is certainly in question. I think you'll see more and more people talk publicly about that. The problem is to determine your top seed. If you get into a tiebreaker situation, it can be a real problem. That could be a real issue.
Yeah, it's not one you want to go to a coin toss on. Ross Dellenger of Yahoo Sports joining us here on JC and Morgan. Let me refer to another one of your tweets. I love this one because you included a glass of, I think that's bourbon on the rocks. I don't know if that's Woodford, Buffalo Trace, what you got cooking there. We can get to the bottom of that in a moment. But you tweeted out, state of college sports, no real transfer policy, cannot police NIL inducements, may owe $3 billion in NIL back pay, 3 cases may deem athletes employees, 1 Ivy League school unionizing, heated fight over a college football playoff format, hot discussion of an NCAA split, and a school suing its league to exit. Yeah, I would say it's a pretty busy offseason.
Yeah. Yeah, other than that, everything's pretty good.
Everything is kosher. Well, by the way, what's the bourbon? What are you choosing there?
I'm not a specific, bourbon guy as far as I need just one that I always drink. I rotate quite a few. Woodford certainly being one, as you mentioned there, Bullet, Makers. So I'm
solid.
I kind of play the field.
Healthy rotation.
Yeah. You're still in Louisiana, right? You still live in Louisiana?
No, I'm in D.C. I've been in
D.C. now, right?
5 years. Yeah.
Washington, D.C. Well, you still got those Louisiana roots. So bourbon,
right.
Obviously. I know a lot of people down there. Ross, real quick, just kicking it back to you. So you've had like a meteoric, is that how you say it?
Meteoric,
fast rise in our industry, man. I remember, I think you were covering the LSU beat for Gannett for a while, and I've always been familiar with your work. Talk about what it's like to take it to the next level. I mean, some people can talk about it. Some people can have the title. You earn it. You're one of the few people out there who just reports. And when you give your opinion, it's like, hey, here's my opinion, but you guys decide. As a reader, I appreciate that so much. You could just kind of talk about your style and your career and how you've gotten to where you're at here, and probably the most interesting time in the history of our sport to cover it.
Yeah, well, I do. One of the goals of mine always is to report fair and accurate, and let the readers decide and keep my opinion out of it. It gets harder these days with social media and with like podcasting and stuff like that to not give your opinion, but I try to let the facts kind of speak for themselves. When I was younger in my career, probably didn't do that enough and learn from it a little bit. There were growing pains, I think, in my career, and it has been a pretty crazy 5 to 7 years or so. As you mentioned, I covered LSU for the Advocate there in Baton Rouge and the New Orleans Times-Picayune for 5.5 years or so. And before that, covered Missouri, and before that, I had a stint covering Auburn and did high schools, and so I bounced around the SEC beats and got the SI job to go national in 2018, summer of 2018, and then moved over to Yahoo in July. It's been great. Love it. And just try to carry everything I did as a beat writer, working hard, fair, accurate, developing relationships and sourcing over. My first couple of years as a national reporter were writing a lot about football, as you might imagine. The last 3 years or so has been writing about sports business a lot in the changing environment of college athletics, which I've kind of embraced. And it's kind of a grind, and it's not exactly why I got into it, but it's important right now. And, it's probably the most important thing is the changes and transformation of college athletics industry.
A number of people obviously read your work. I'm sure there's a good portion of our audience watching and listening now that also kind of came across with you and the introduction to your work, the segments on Paul Feinbaum, right? I mean, it's a vastly popular show. You've been on there a lot to break some major news stories. Here's my question. We're still in a kill the messenger state of mind, right, from fans. And God forbid you do give an opinion, you're going to be crucified over it. What is a story or a segment you had on that show where you took the most heat over, again, just delivering the message?
Well, nothing really compares to COVID.
Yeah.
The COVID season, the COVID summer, reporting around what college athletic leaders were talking about doing, what they ended up doing. I remember being frustrated enough to send out a post on social media in the summer of, COVID summer. I think I just recently reported about, the heart issue that, ultimately why the Big Ten stopped or had originally decided not to play football. And we had reported out that story, kind of unearthing that it was because of the heart issue, potentially with is
that myocarditis?
Myocarditis. And so we reported out that story, and it's like I just took all of this criticism for this story, and it wasn't an opinion piece. It was just, here's myocarditis. Here's why the Big Ten says it's shutting down. Whether you think that's right or not is your opinion. I didn't give mine, but I still got slammed for being anti-football and whatever else when I just reporting out that story. So the COVID year certainly brought out, as it did with many aspects, I think, certainly brought out some passionate feelings. So that was probably the most that I heard from people about.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Wrapping things up with Ross Dellenger. Ross, give us an idea. I don't want you to, break what you're focusing on right now for obvious reasons, but I would imagine part of the equation is still there's a lot of meat left on the bone with that playoff structure, right? I mean, nothing has been finalized yet. So, I mean, is this something where you're just keeping your ear to the grindstone and trying to put this jigsaw puzzle together to where everybody will know exactly what we're looking at going forward? It used to be spring football would be something for you to follow right about now or on the heels of it. I don't even know where that fits right now in the list of priorities.
Yeah, it's really low. Yeah, I think the next couple of weeks there'll be meetings. We'll know maybe more by the end of this week. Certainly by the end of next week. Conference basketball tournaments are next week. And at the sites, I think there'll be meetings with administrators to kind of more socialize and explore the model. So over the next 2 weeks are pretty big to determine, the course of the playoff for 2026 and beyond.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any strong take on, are you pro guardrails or anti guardrails? I see you and Wetzel going back and forth on that and some of the other guys. Do you have any opinion on that at all, or are you just kind of still in report the facts mode?
Yeah, I mean, I try to offer with Wetzel, I try to offer the other side often so we can have a spirited, somewhat debate and podcast. So I'll often offer the opinion of the administrative side. Certainly for a long time, college athletics, specifically college football and college basketball, ignored change and avoided it. And look, we're here right now. College athletics is here in this place because of really one thing, and everybody will. I think most people who are knowledgeable will agree that there's this one thing that has led to this happening, and it's coaching salaries. And they've just gotten to that point. And if coaches were still making $1 million instead of 6, 8, 10 million, we probably wouldn't be in this situation. But we're here, and administrators, I think, for a long time had put off change, and now they can't put it off anymore.
Yeah, what I always find interesting is the anti-guardrail people constantly like to refer back to the NFL, and I want to just say back, the NFL does have guardrails. It's called a salary cap. It's called contracts. Like, you can't just get up and leave at the flip of a hat whenever you want. Like, it's kind of contradicting what their take is in a lot of ways. You mentioned the podcast. Tell everybody how they can catch that, because I really enjoy the work of both you guys.
Yeah, I think it's called the College Football Inquirer. So me, Dan Wetzel, and Pat Forty. You can catch it on like Apple Music. You can catch it on the Yahoo site, I believe. Wherever you get your podcast, just Google, search it, and it should come up.
And, of course, you'll keep doing great work on Yahoo as well. Ross, it's good to finally make some kind of an introduction. Maybe we'll cross paths down the road in person. In the meantime, we'll keep reading your stuff and listening to your stuff. I think you do outstanding work. Thank you so much for taking out the time.
All right, guys. Thanks.
You got it. Thanks, Ross Dellenger, Yahoo Sports, joining us here on JC and Morgan. A lot to unpack there, JC.
Yeah, a lot of really kind of a cool guest.
Yeah,
it's kind of refreshing to get somebody that's like, "Hey, man, what's going on?" I'm Ross. It's kind of badass, to be honest. I like.
Yeah,
I wish I was more that way sometimes.
Oh, that's the antithesis of Shurb Nation now.
Demonstrative's one of my middle names.
You're on the boundaries. He's more like just on the, and that's how he is when he's on Feinbaum, and it's always very chilled and laid back and kind of a just the facts, ma'am. He doesn't really tip his hat one way or another. He's kind of old school in that. He's just going to let you know what's going on. You formulate your own opinion.
We need that. I mean, in all media, they need that these days and all that. But can't thank him enough. Just a lot of interesting things that he said. And, and I think that question about 14 versus 16, I think that's going to come up some, Mike.
Yeah.
These home games, I'm telling you, fans are going to get – fans are fans, right? They look forward. I mentioned there's only 12 – there's only, 6, 7, maybe 8 home games?
Yeah.
College football is – the fabric of the sport is stitched into those magical tailgating afternoons in campus town A, B, or C with your buddies and family. That's why everybody's as passionate. That's the root of it. You start disincentivizing conference championships because your fans aren't going to get to have another game at home. And I know the players and coaches aren't going to feel this way, but there's something to be said for that type of consolation prize. Yeah. I mean, I just don't know how it's going to work. I don't really care for the Big Ten and SEC. You want to give them a certain number of bids, auto bids. I'm fine with that. But there are just years, man, where the Big Ten, there's Big 12 or, ACC teams that are better, even with the SEC in rare seasons, not all the time, but in like 2016, I would have had Clemson ahead of Alabama.
There's no question. Well, and in my hypothetical, and Florida State's probably going to take a step back. They lost a lot. They lost their starting quarterback, their top 2 wide receivers, their starting running back, some linemen, Jared Verse. But let's just say it was last year's Florida State team. And that team, and without the injury, of course, to the quarterback, and that team in this format went 13-0. Trying to think their best non-con win. Well, they beat LSU. LSU was not LSU, but still, that's a quality non-con win, neutral field against an SEC opponent,
Heisman Trophy winner.
Yeah. And so that team, and in this format, Florida State would have played Clemson in the ACC championship game. I mean, that's the thing. The Big Ten ACC championship games have been so god awful because it hasn't been the top two teams.
Well, wait, no. This year the ACC switched.
No, I know. I'm saying in years past we haven't had that. So I'm trying to jigsaw puzzle this where last year's Florida State team, this year's format, right? So this year they would have played Clemson in the ACC. Or who was number 2? I don't know.
It was Louisville. The ACC flipped the switch on that last year.
Oh, they did.
So
okay.
The
Big Ten is. I'm sorry. You're right.
The Big Ten and SEC are coming up this year.
It's still hard to think of Louisville as the second. That was not the second best team.
Yeah,
in
they
the
were.
ACC.
No, not at the end. Not Clemson. Probably was at the end, but it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, because FSU, Louisville, Clemson are all in the Atlantic Division with NC State. NC State probably was the second best team in the league at the end, by the way. But it was a weird year. But they did flip it. But you're right. Because in some years, Clemson doesn't play Pitt or Virginia or whoever.
Right.
They get a little stiffer challenge from a Florida State, NC State, somebody like that, right?
Yeah, I went down the wrong rabbit hole. Here's what I'm trying to say. If it was one of those really good Clemson teams and last year's really good Florida State team,
yes,
they would have met in the ACC championship game. And one of those teams would have been 13-0. And so it doesn't matter that the SEC is a better league than the ACC virtually every year. You mentioned maybe the one notable exception. It doesn't matter in that you could still have a team worthy of a bye that comes from another conference. But in this format that's being proposed, no, too bad. I do think one of the things they're leaving, you can kind of read into this however you may, they're leaving a cushion knowing that there's a good chance the Big Ten, the SEC, could further expand. And so if that happens, it's really, it could be game over for a league like the ACC. It certainly would debilitate the rest of the other Power 2 conferences.
Look, at some point, I think what's going to happen, Mike, is this game, set, match, checkmate, whatever you want to call it. These other leagues can exist as basketball conferences in every other sport. And for football, the Big Ten and the SEC are going to combine like the AFL and NFL did. And you're going to have one college football league. And I still think Chip Kelly's idea is the best. I think there's probably no more than 64 that belong. It's a nice, even number, 8 regions of 8. And then you have playoffs, and you rotate the schedule, and you still play 1 or 2 group of 5 or SCS games to keep the money flowing in that direction for those teams and athletic departments. And you just go from there. I mean, I thought, and then the other sports revert back to making sense. I don't know if nobody wants to do that right now because football, I mean, they're still cutting checks for $38 million a year to the Big 10 or Big 12 or whatever. But people they're hanging on to it like Gollum in Lord of the Rings with his precious stone.
And you still have that grant and rights deal until 2036 that, I mean, they are trying to find a loophole, and they haven't found it yet. And then now the only plausible move, it seems, is to just say, well, guaranteed TV money be damned. We're going to leave anyway, even though it's going to cost us gobs and gobs of money. That's how bad we don't want to be. It's how badly we don't want to be in your league, which is just a rough look for everybody involved. Should be a lot of fun as we wrap things up. A lot of things coming up here, JC, that we covered with Ross. We are going to have more and more major news coming out in the coming days. So it's for those of you just waiting on your favorite team to participate in spring football and find out who's going to be number 1 on the depth chart at that number 2 wide receiver spot, that'll still be there for you, and you can still get access to it. People like the great J.C. Shurburtt and 24/7 Sports will cover it like no other. But from a national standpoint, that's really going to get buried because there's so many major cataclysmic things going on in the sport that are radically different than the sport we grew up on.
Yeah, one thing quick before we go, just to report to our audience, since we talked about it earlier, FanDuel released their odds for the first expanded Big 12 Conference Championship. Amazingly enough, Oklahoma State's 8th. plus 16.
Wow.
I haven't looked and see who they've lost. I know they got their running back coming back, who was really good.
Yeah.
Utah, K-State, Kansas, and Arizona are the top four that the odds makers have, followed by Texas Tech, UCF, Iowa State, Oklahoma State, then TCU, West Virginia, Coach Prime, Baylor, Cincinnati, Arizona State, BYU, and Houston. So
Hey,
every time I look at this group of teams, though, they could go up, they could go down. It's just it should be called the Big P, and that's not derogatory. It has potential. All these programs have.
I wonder
great
where you were
potential.
going with that.
Yeah, the Big P, great potential.
Thought we were going to put an explicit label on JC.
Well, that could also be a name for the. No, we won't go there. But big potential,
or a Sopranos character. Yeah, thank you for getting that. I do think it's going to be the most unpredictable league year in, year out, which I love. I think it's great for sure. Hey, our thanks again to Ross Dellenger. For those of you on the Chief Sports Network, you got ITG coming up. Actually, got ITG going on. We'll see you folks, many of you folks there. And for the rest of you, we'll see you back here next week on JC and Morgan. So long, everybody.